At the risk of scaring off some people, I thought I would talk about worship and what it really means in spiritual unfoldment. I don't hear the word worship used much in spiritual circles. Devotion, perhaps, but not worship. The Creed of Full Dawn Circle recognizes spiritual practice as worship. Spiritual practice aligns us with the divine, or if you prefer to use a more wordy secular term, aligns us to our true nature beyond the individual self. The mission of Full Dawn Circle involves sharing about the reality of the divine and our true divine nature, and the peace, love, joy, and contentment that arises and deepens as we align, increase our receptivity to the presence of the divine, and prepare ourselves for the grace of awakening. But what is worship really? Is it just spiritual practice, or does it have a deeper significance? First, let's consider the definition of worship. The formal definition of worship is this: the act of offering reverence, love, or devotion to a deity, idol, or sacred object through ceremony, prayer, or other religious form. This definition implies a duality of a worshiper and that which is worshipped. But it is just this duality that limits how we view worship. Before we enter this spiritual path with the intention of awakening, we can only worship in duality. Whatever our object of reverence is, it is something different from us. We are separate individuals worshiping this object of reverence. What we don't realize is that ultimately, worship is the divine worshiping the divine, beyond duality and beyond oneness. We're just along for the ride. This understanding begins to unfold as we move along on our spiritual journey. Through the surrender inherent in spiritual practice and the preparation for awakening, we encounter divine grace, which wakes us up as pure conscious being and out of identification with our limited individuality. This is when we awaken to self-realization or cosmic consciousness. Now, our sense of who we are has changed. Although our individuality continues to appear within that pure conscious being, and within that also appears everything else in existence that we can perceive. So who would the worshiper be, the individual or pure conscious being? And one might also wonder, what would the object of worship be? And these questions arise again when further along we awaken to the oneness of unity consciousness. In this awakened stage, all is one universal being. Is worship now obsolete? And then there's more. Later we discover the reality of the divine beyond oneness. Now we really have to question whether worship is obsolete, or if not, who worships what? Now we get to the heart of the matter, and I don't mean to be silly here. At this point in the spiritual journey, we discover that being, consciousness, and all of existence resides in the divine, and that our true nature is not limited to being or consciousness, but is divine. And because being, consciousness, and existence arise from the reverence of the divine for itself, we ultimately realize that the worshiper is actually the divine in the appearance of us as individuals. And that which is worshipped is also the divine. So once we recognize our true divine nature, we are worshiping the divine, both as the appearance of an individual and as the divine itself. Everything we experience is the divine worshiping itself. We just seem to be part of the flow in that grand reverence and love of the divine. And we find that worship is always in process, even if we as individuals are not actively engaged in a specific act of worship. Worship, then, is the perfect communion in which we are continuously engaged, even if we are not conscious of that divine reality. But the beauty of worship is that we can be engaged in the process, whatever our stage of awakening, just by engaging in worship in the form of spiritual practice. With spiritual practice, we align with the divine. We open to its presence. We prepare for its grace. And we unfold spiritually until such time we recognize our true nature, and the nature of everything is divine. And then worship is a continuous flow of love and light of the divine in reverence to itself, in which we have the great joy of being a participant.